Hey there, welcome back. Tonight, we're taking a quiet journey into medieval Europe, where feudal power quietly governed the land, and everyday life unfolded far from the light of history. Most histories of feudalism speak in terms of landlords and obligations, but rarely pause to ask how it felt to live inside that system, to wake within it, breathe within it, and carry its weight through an ordinary day. By watching this video, you'll learn how daily life under feudalism was shaped not by grand events, but by routine, endurance, and a steady negotiation with land, time, and survival. Imagine the moment just before dawn. The sky is neither dark nor light, but something in between. A heavy gray that presses low against the fields. The air is cold enough to sting your nose, even in warmer months, and your breath leaves a faint trace that vanishes almost as soon as it appears. Somewhere nearby, a rooster calls, not as an alarm, but as a habit older than memory. This is how most days begin. There is no clock to consult, no clear boundary between night and morning. Time announces itself through the body, through stiffness in the joints, through hunger that has settled in the stomach overnight, through the subtle change in sound as the village begins to stir. Feet move across packed earth. A door creaks open. Straw shifts beneath weight. Life resumes, not because it is chosen, but because it must. Before we begin, a small note. If you enjoy these calm journeys through history, I upload new videos every day. So consider subscribing and turning on the bell. And tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? I love imagining people drifting off to the same story under different skies. The day under feudalism does not begin with ambition. It begins with necessity. You rise from a bed made not for comfort, but for rest that is just sufficient. Straw, packed and reused, shifts beneath your weight. The air inside the house is thick, holding onto the smell of smoke from last night's fire, the presence of animals kept close for warmth, and the faint sourness of damp wool. There is little separation between bodies and objects here. Everything shares the same space, the same breath. Light enters slowly, filtering through a small opening or a rough window, more suggestion than illumination. Shadows cling to the corners of the room. Shapes are recognized not by sight, but by familiarity. You know where everything is because it has always been there, because nothing ever moves very far. Dressing is simple and repetitive. Wool garments, worn thin by years of use, are pulled on without thought. The fabric scratches against skin already hardened by labor. There is no decision involved, no question of what to wear, no concern for appearance beyond function. Clothing exists to endure, just like the body inside it. Outside, the village begins to take shape. Huts and cottages sit low against the land, built to resist wind more than to welcome light. Smoke rises in thin columns, blending into the gray sky. The ground is uneven, worn smooth by generations of footsteps following the same paths day after day. Mud clings to shoes. Stones press through thin soles. Sound arrives gradually, the muffled lowing of cattle, the scrape of wood against wood as a door is opened, quiet voices used sparingly in the early hours. No one wastes energy here, not in speech, not in movement, not in thought. The land waits. Fields stretch outward from the village, divided not by fences, but by custom and memory. You know which strips belong to whom, not because they are marked, but because they always have. The soil is dark and heavy, holding the moisture of night. It carries the promise of growth, but also the certainty of labor. This earth will demand effort before it gives anything back. Work begins early, because daylight is precious. When the sun is high, labor is already underway. When it sets, it is too late to recover what was not done. Time here is not wasted, but it is also not saved. It moves forward steadily, indifferent to intention. As you step into the field, tools are gathered, simple, worn, repaired more often than replaced, a plow smoothed by years of use, a hoe with a handle polished by countless hands. These objects are extensions of the body, shaped by it, trusted more than anything new could be. The first movements of the day are slow. Muscles resist, stiff from rest that was never enough. There is a brief moment where the body remembers yesterday's labor, and the day before that, and the one before that as well. Pain is not sharp or surprising. It is familiar, like an old companion that arrives each morning without needing to be invited. Breathing deepens. The rhythm of work establishes itself. Push, lift, step. Push, lift, step. The ground yields slightly under pressure, then holds firm. Hands grow numb in the cold, then warm as effort increases. Sweat forms beneath layers of wool, even as the air remains chilled. There is no sense of starting the day in the modern meaning of the phrase. The day does not feel new. It feels like a continuation, a thread picked up exactly where it was dropped the night before. Nothing has changed. Nothing is expected to change. Above all of this looms an unspoken structure. The land is worked, but it is not owned. The harvest will come, but it will not all belong to those who bring it from the soil. Obligations hover quietly over every movement, as present as the sky, as unquestioned as gravity. You do not need to think about them for them to exist. This is not a life of constant fear, but it is a life of constant awareness. Awareness of weather, awareness of seasons, awareness of what happens if the harvest fails, if illness strikes, if strength falters too early. These thoughts do not arrive dramatically. They sit in the background, shaping decisions without demanding attention. Morning advances almost unnoticed. Light strengthens. Colors emerge. The muted brown of earth, the dull green of young shoots, the gray of stone and wood. Birds grow louder. The village is fully awake now, though no one would describe it that way. There is movement everywhere, but little sense of urgency. Everything proceeds at the pace it always has. Under feudalism, daily life is not defined by choice, but by repetition. Repetition builds skill. It also builds limits. The body becomes capable, but the horizon remains fixed. There is comfort in knowing what comes next, even when what comes next is labor. As the sun finally clears the edge of the world, there is a brief moment of warmth on the face. It is subtle, almost unremarkable, but it is noticed. Small changes matter here. A break in the wind, a dry day after rain, a harvest slightly better than expected. These are the measures by which fortune is judged. The morning continues, indistinguishable from countless mornings before it. And yet, within this sameness, life persists, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. Breath follows breath, step follows step. The field accepts the weight placed upon it, and the people do the same. This is what daily life under feudalism actually felt like at its beginning. Not oppression as spectacle, not misery as performance, but endurance, woven quietly into the hours before dawn, carried forward by habit, necessity, and the slow turning of time. And as the sun climbs higher, the day has truly begun. Part 2. The weight of the soil. The day does not pause once it has begun. Under feudalism, morning does not feel like a threshold crossed, but like a deepening, the same work, now carried out with more light and heavier breath. The fields that seemed quiet before dawn begin to reveal their full presence, stretching outward in long, uneven strips that follow no clean geometry, only the memory of repeated use. The soil is cold at first. It resists the blade, clinging stubbornly, as though reluctant to give itself up. Each step forward requires pressure through the legs and hips, a deliberate transfer of weight that travels from the shoulders down into the ground. The plow creaks, wood rubbing against wood, iron biting into earth that has known this touch for centuries. The sound is dull and rhythmic, neither sharp nor loud, but persistent enough to fill the air. This is not work, performed for improvement. There is no expectation that the land will become easier, that the task will one day disappear. Labor here exists to maintain a fragile balance, to keep hunger at bay, to ensure survival through another season. Every movement serves a purpose that is immediate and practical. Nothing is symbolic, nothing is optional. Hands grow dirty quickly, soil works its way under fingernails into creases of skin that never fully clean. The smell of earth rises as it is turned, damp and mineral, carrying with it the memory of rain and decay. This scent becomes inseparable from the idea of work itself. It is the smell of effort, of dependency, of the quiet contract between people and land. Animals move alongside you if they are available. Oxen lean into their harnesses, slow and steady, their breath visible in the cool air. They do not rush, neither do you. Speed has no advantage here. Endurance matters more. A steady pace preserves strength, and strength must last the entire day, and then the next, and then the next. After that, the body settles into repetition. At first, each motion requires attention. Later, the movements happen without conscious thought. Muscles remember what to do even when the mind drifts. Pain does not disappear, but it becomes predictable. A dull pressure in the lower back, a burn in the shoulders, stiffness spreading gradually as the hours pass. Sharp pain would be alarming. This kind of pain is expected. Around you, others work in parallel silence. Conversation is minimal, not because it is forbidden, but because breath is better spent on labor. When words do appear, they are practical. A brief exchange about weather, about the condition of the soil, about how much remains to be done. There is no storytelling here, no dramatic expression. Speech serves the same function as everything else, utility. The sun climbs slowly, altering the texture of the day. Frost melts where it lingered. Moisture lifts from the ground, clinging briefly to hems of clothing before evaporating. Light reveals small details, stones turned up by the plow, roots resisting removal, the uneven line of the furrow left behind. Progress is measured visually, not emotionally. You see what has been done because it lies behind you. Time under feudalism is deeply physical. It is felt in the arms growing heavy, in the sweat trapped beneath layers of wool, in the subtle shift from cold discomfort to warmth that borders on exhaustion. There is no clear signal for when one phase of the day ends and another begins. The body simply adapts as conditions change. The land does not respond with gratitude. It offers no immediate reward. Seed planted today will not feed anyone for months. The connection between effort and results stretches across seasons, not hours. Faith in this delayed return is not philosophical. It is learned through necessity. Those who stop working because the reward feels distant do not last long. Above this labor hangs the structure of obligation. A portion of this work serves not the household, but the Lord. Fields set aside, days required, produce owed regardless of yield. This knowledge exists quietly in the background. It does not provoke constant anger. It does not require daily reflection. It simply shapes the edges of what is possible, narrowing the future into something already defined. As midday approaches, hunger becomes noticeable. Not dramatic, not sharp, but persistent. A hollow presence that reminds you of limits. Meals are planned around work, not the other way around. You eat when the work allows it, not when the body requests it. Even the act of stopping carries weight, because stopping means time lost. When rest does come, it is brief. You straighten slowly, feeling the protest of muscles that would prefer not to move at all. The world seems louder when you pause. Insects, wind through grass, distant voices. Food is simple and quickly consumed. Bread is coarse. Whatever accompanies, it is eaten without ceremony. The purpose of eating is to continue working. There is no sense of monotony in the modern meaning of the word. Monotony implies boredom, dissatisfaction, a desire for variation. Here, repetition is simply reality. The fields do not change enough to inspire boredom. They demand attention, precision, and respect. A mistake made through carelessness can ruin an entire strip of land. As work resumes, the sun stands higher and shadows shorten. Heat settles more fully now, pressing down through layers of clothing. Sweat darkens fabric. The smell of bodies mixes with the scent of earth. Flies gather. Small irritations multiply. An itch that cannot be scratched. A stone in the shoe that must be endured until a natural pause arrives. And still, the work continues. There is a quiet dignity in this persistence, though it is rarely named as such by those living it. Pride does not come from achievement, but from completion, from finishing what must be done despite discomfort. The day feels successful not because it was pleasant, but because it did not fail. By the time afternoon begins its slow descent, the body has adjusted fully to its task. Fatigue deepens, but movements remain steady. The field looks different now, reshaped by effort, bearing visible evidence of time spent. This transformation is subtle, incremental, but real. Under feudalism, the land absorbs labor as naturally as it absorbs rain, and those who work it learn to measure their lives not by milestones, but by furrows cut, seeds placed, and hours endured beneath an open sky. The soil takes everything you give it, and tomorrow it will ask again. Part 3. Bread, gruel, and the shape of hunger. Hunger under feudalism is not an emergency. It is a condition. It settles into the body early in life and rarely leaves. By the time the morning's labor has stretched into hours, it becomes a quiet pressure beneath the ribs, neither sharp nor dramatic, but constant enough to shape thought. You do not panic at hunger. Panic is reserved for sudden things. Hunger is expected, like rain in spring or frost in winter. It belongs to the rhythm of living. Food is not imagined in variety, but in adequacy. The question is never what will be eaten, only whether there will be enough. When the time comes to eat, it does not interrupt the day so much as briefly bend it. Work pauses where it stands. Hands wipe against woolen sleeves. Body straightens slowly, reluctantly, as though afraid that standing still too long might make it difficult to start again. There is no table laid with care, no separation between labor and nourishment. Food appears where it is needed and disappears just as quickly. Bread is the center of the meal, not the light, airy bread of later centuries, but something darker, denser, made from rye or barley when wheat is scarce or reserved. It is heavy in the hand, rough on the tongue, and filling in a way that satisfies the stomach, even when it disappoints the senses. This bread is not meant to be enjoyed. It is meant to last. Alongside it comes pottage, a thick, slow-simmered mixture of grains, legumes, and whatever vegetables are available. It changes subtly with the seasons, but never enough to feel new. Turnips, onions, leeks, cabbage. Occasionally, herbs when they can be spared. Meat appears rarely, and when it does, it is stretched carefully, diluted into broths or stews so that its presence lingers longer than its quantity would suggest. The smell of food is modest. There is no sharp aroma announcing abundance. Steam rises gently, carrying warmth more than flavor. Eating is efficient. Mouthfuls are measured unconsciously, paced to avoid finishing too quickly. There is a quiet awareness that once the bowl is empty, there is nothing more until the next appointed time. Drink accompanies the meal, but rarely water. Ale, weak and cloudy, serves as both nourishment and safety. It carries calories and hydration together, trusted more than untreated water sources. Children drink it too, in diluted form, learning early the taste of fermentation as part of daily life. There is little conversation while eating. Chewing takes precedence. The body focuses inward, receiving what it needs to continue. When words are spoken, they are practical. A comment on the thickness of the bread, a brief note on how long the pottage has lasted this season. Complaints are rare. Complaining implies expectation, and expectation is dangerous. Hunger returns quickly after the meal ends. The food dulls it rather than removes it. Within an hour, the familiar hollow present settles back into place, reminding the body of its limits. And yet, the work resumes as before. Hunger does not stop labor. Labor exists in spite of it. In years when the harvest is poor, hunger sharpens. Bread grows thinner. Pottage becomes more water than substance. Portions shrink slowly, deliberately, as though rationing hope itself. People learn to stretch meals, to ignore the signals of the body when possible, to sleep through hunger when it becomes too distracting. Fasting days complicate this further. The church calendar introduces periods where eating less is not only necessary, but virtuous. Meat is forbidden, meals are reduced, hunger takes on a moral dimension, reframed as discipline rather than deprivation. For those already accustomed to scarcity, this spiritual language blends easily into reality. Feasts, when they come, feel almost unreal. A wedding, a religious festival, a Lord's celebration that spills down into the village. On these rare days, tables are fuller, meat appears openly, bread is softer, lighter. The smell of food is rich enough to linger in memory long after the day ends. But feasts do not rewrite expectations. They are interruptions, not standards. No one imagines that life will become like this regularly. Enjoyment is cautious, restrained by the knowledge that excess today does not protect against hunger tomorrow. Children learn the shape of hunger early. They understand which foods are not to be wasted, which scraps can be saved, which moments justify asking for more. They learn to eat quickly before portions disappear, and to be grateful without being instructed to feel gratitude. Hunger teaches lessons long before words are needed. Illness changes everything. When the body is weak, hunger becomes heavier, more oppressive. Food is needed more urgently, yet often less available. The sick are fed first when possible, but this redistribution is delicate, negotiated quietly within households already stretched thin. Care takes the form of small sacrifices. An extra ladle for one means less for another. There is no clear boundary between nourishment and survival. Eating is not pleasure, it is maintenance. The body is treated like the land, fed just enough to keep producing, to keep enduring. Waste is not immoral because it is sinful, but because it is dangerous. As the day continues and the sun shifts westward, hunger becomes a background companion. It influences posture, slows reactions, softens tempers. It does not dominate thought, but it shapes it subtly, like a current beneath the surface of the mind. In the evening, another meal arrives. It resembles the first closely enough to feel like an echo rather than a conclusion. Bread again, pottage again, perhaps slightly thicker, perhaps not. The day's work has earned no variety, only repetition. Under feudalism, daily life is calibrated around this cycle of effort and sustenance. Hunger marks time as clearly as bells or shadows. It is not something to be solved, only managed. And when night finally approaches, and the body lies down to rest, hunger often remains, quieter now, dulled by fatigue, but present. It waits patiently, knowing it will be there again before dawn. This is the shape of hunger under feudalism, not dramatic starvation, but a constant narrowing of possibility, lived quietly, carried forward from one day to the next. Part 4. The Lord's Shadow. Power under feudalism is rarely loud. It does not arrive with raised voices or sudden commands, nor does it need to. It exists quietly, steadily, in the same way the land itself exists, unquestioned, unavoidable, and woven into the structure of daily life. You do not wake each morning thinking about authority, yet every movement you make is shaped by its presence. The Lord is not always visible. Days can pass without seeing him, without hearing his name spoken aloud, and still his influence is constant. It lives in obligations that guide labor as firmly as weather does. Certain fields are not yours to decide how to use. Certain days are not yours to spend as you choose. A portion of what you grow is already claimed long before the seed touches the soil. This awareness does not arrive as anger. It settles slowly, learned early and reinforced daily until it feels as natural as the changing of seasons. Children grow up knowing which land feeds their household and which land serves another family higher in the hierarchy. No one explains this directly. It is absorbed through repetition, through where they are sent to work, through what is carried away at harvest, through what remains behind. Hierarchy under feudalism is not theoretical. It is spatial. It is visible in how the village is arranged, in how buildings sit on the land, in which paths are walked freely, and which are approached with caution. The distinction between authority and labor is embedded so deeply in routine that questioning it rarely occurs. To question it would be to question the shape of the world itself. When labor is owed, it is owed regardless of circumstance. Illness complicates the day, but it does not erase duty. Rain may delay work, but it does not remove obligation. Injury is unfortunate, but expectation remains. Duties exist independently of personal hardship, like winter or drought, conditions that must be endured rather than negotiated. This understanding shapes behavior quietly. People pace themselves not only according to their own strength, but according to what must still be delivered upward. Energy is measured carefully. Risk is avoided where possible. Overexertion today might mean failure tomorrow, and failure carries consequences that ripple outward beyond the individual. The manor house or castle sits apart from the village, elevated physically or symbolically, often both. Its walls are thicker, its roof stronger, its materials more durable. Stone replaces mud. Timber is fitted more precisely. It does not dominate the landscape aggressively. It simply occupies it with confidence, like something built to last longer than the lives unfolding around it. From the fields below, it feels watchful, even when no one is visible, not threatening exactly, but present. It reminds those who labor beneath it that their work is seen, counted, and claimed. The building itself becomes a symbol of continuity and control, standing still while generations pass beneath its shadow. Approaching this space changes the body. Footsteps slow, voices lower, movements become deliberate. This reaction comes before conscious thought. It is not fear in the sharp sense, but caution, a learned restraint shaped by observation and memory. Even those who have never been punished understand the boundaries instinctively. Justice under feudalism is local and personal. Disputes are not carried to distant institutions. They are settled nearby, often by the lord or his representatives. This closeness makes authority immediate, but also unpredictable. Outcomes depend on reputation, timing, and favor as much as on wrongdoing itself. Punishments are visible by design. A fine imposed publicly, a tool confiscated, time spent in the stocks, a brief beating witnessed by others. These acts are not meant only to correct the individual, they instruct the community. Justice works through memory, something seen once and remembered long afterward. Physical punishment exists, but it is not constant. Its power lies in its possibility. The knowledge that it can happen is often enough. Excessive cruelty is discouraged not always from compassion, but from practicality. A broken body cannot work. Authority depends on labor continuing. The Lord's demands are not always unreasonable by the standards of the time. Protection is expected in return, from raiders, from rival lords, from disorder beyond the estate's borders. In stable periods, this exchange can feel almost balanced. The Lord provides order. The villagers provide labor. Each side fulfills a role. But when instability arrives, the fragility of this arrangement becomes clear. Protection does not always come in time. Armed men may pass through too quickly. Violence may erupt without warning. In these moments, the limits of authority reveal themselves. The system strains, though it rarely collapses entirely. Taxes and dues take many forms. Grain measured carefully, livestock counted, days of labor assigned, small payments made in kind rather than coin. These obligations are tracked with precision, even when written records are few. Memory becomes a ledger, carried by households and reinforced through repetition. Everyone knows what is owed and when. Forgetting is dangerous. The calendar itself bends around these demands. Certain seasons bring heavier pressure. Others offer brief relief. Planning revolves around obligation more than preference. The emotional weight of the system is quiet. Frustration exists, but it rarely turns into open defiance. Rebellion is risky and often futile. Survival depends more on compliance than resistance. People learn to adapt within limits rather than confront them directly. Occasionally, the Lord appears among the villagers. He inspects land, settles disputes, oversees collection. These moments disrupt routine. Work slows, attention sharpens. Even those who do not interact directly feel the shift, like air changing before a storm. Afterward, conversation becomes cautious. Who spoke too freely? Who seemed displeased? Who appeared favored? These observations matter. Knowledge becomes safety, memory becomes strategy, and yet the relationship is not purely oppressive. Feudal life is built on proximity. Lords often know the people who work their land by sight, sometimes by name. In small communities, familiarity blurs the line between authority and dependency. Mercy exists alongside control, unevenly distributed and unpredictable. A lord may reduce demands after a poor harvest. He may offer grain during winter. He may intervene gently rather than harshly. These actions do not remove hierarchy, but they soften it. Reputation matters upward as well as downward. Festivals hosted by the Lord offer brief glimpses into another rhythm of life. Better food, stronger drink, music carrying across the fields. These moments do not erase inequality, but they momentarily loosen its grip. Celebration becomes a controlled release, enough to maintain stability without threatening structure. Still, the shadow remains. It stretches across fields, across calendars, across choices never made because they were never available. It shapes ambition by narrowing it. Dreams do not extend far because there is little space for them to land. Under feudalism, daily life unfolds within this quiet enclosure of power. You are not constantly reminded of it, but you are never free from it either. Authority does not need to intervene often to remain effective. Its strength lies in how rarely it must act. As the day continues, labor moves forward under the same sky, on the same land, within the same boundaries. The Lord's shadow does not darken every moment. Warmth and routine still exist beneath it, but it is always there, angled just enough to remind you where you stand. And in that quiet, constant presence, feudal power does its most enduring work, not through force alone, but by becoming part of the landscape of everyday life itself. Under feudalism, power is not experienced only as authority. It is experienced as time, not time measured by bells or daylight, but time already claimed before it begins. Certain hours of the week are not yours, even before you wake. Certain stretches of effort do not belong to your household, no matter how urgently your own needs press inward. Obligation does not arrive as a demand spoken aloud. It arrives as an assumption built into the day. You learn this rhythm early. There are days when you walk past your own field and do not stop. The soil waits, familiar and urgent, yet untouched. Your body knows what it needs to do there. Weeds rising too quickly, earth drying faster than expected. But today is not for that. Today belongs elsewhere. Today, your labor has already been assigned. This knowledge settles quietly into movement. Tools are lifted without resentment. Feet follow paths learned by repetition. The mind does not protest loudly, because protest has never altered the pattern. Instead, attention turns toward efficiency, how to complete the required work with enough strength left to return to what is truly necessary later. Obligation shapes the body long before it shapes thought. You learn to pace yourself not according to exhaustion, but according to sequence. Certain muscles must be preserved, certain energy held back. Working too hard too early risks failure later, and failure carries weight. You do not spend yourself freely. You ration effort the way you ration food. There is a subtle tension in these days, one that never fully surfaces but never disappears either. It hums beneath each action. Every hour spent away from your own land is an hour your household cannot reclaim. The mind keeps quiet track of what is being delayed, even while hands perform what is required. Time itself becomes divided, not evenly, but hierarchically. Some hours feel heavier than others. They demand more from the body, while offering less in return. These are the hours given upward. They stretch longer. Fatigue settles more quickly. And yet, they must be endured with care. Carelessness here is dangerous. Mistakes are noticed. Reputation is formed not by grand actions, but by consistency. You learn to work differently under obligation. Movements become restrained. Risks are avoided. Innovation is unnecessary. What matters is completion, not excellence. To stand out is to attract attention, and attention is rarely beneficial. Obligation also reshapes emotion. Frustration exists, but it is managed internally. Anger has nowhere useful to go. Open resentment threatens stability, not only for the individual, but for the household tied to them. Instead, feeling is redirected into habit. Routine absorbs emotion until it dulls. There are moments, however, when the weight sharpens. A child falls ill on a day owed to the Lord. Weather threatens your own crops while your hands labor elsewhere. Hunger presses harder than usual, and still the work must be done. These moments force choices that are not ethical in the abstract, but unavoidable in practice. Under feudalism, morality bends toward survival. The question is not what is right, but what is possible. You do not choose between good and evil. You choose between consequences. The system trains this instinct quietly, repeatedly, until it becomes reflex. Obligation lives not only in days, but in weeks and seasons. Certain times of year tighten its grip. Harvest brings increased demand. Winter repayment follows autumn survival. Each season carries its own expectations, layered one atop another. Relief is temporary, conditional, never complete. Memory becomes crucial here. You remember how last year unfolded, where pressure increased, when exhaustion peaked. This memory informs strategy. You prepare not for freedom, but for endurance. Planning is not about expansion. It is about minimizing loss. Children observe this without commentary. They watch adults adjust pace, mood, and movement according to invisible rules. They learn which days feel heavier, which evenings arrive with deeper fatigue. Obligation is taught without words, absorbed through atmosphere. Even rest is shaped by what is owed. On days when labor has been claimed elsewhere, rest feels conditional. It carries an edge of urgency. The body recovers, but the mind remains alert, already turning toward what has been delayed. True rest, the kind that restores without calculation, is rare. It requires time that belongs fully to the household, and such time is limited. Obligation also structures social relationships. Neighbors coordinate silently, aware of shared constraints. Assistance is offered cautiously, timed around common duties. Solidarity exists, but it must fit into the narrow spaces allowed by authority. Mutual aid survives, but only where it does not threaten compliance. There is no single moment when obligation feels unbearable. Its power lies in accumulation. Day after day, week after week, it claims small portions until they feel inseparable from life itself. The system does not need force, constantly. Habit does the work. And yet, within this structure, people adapt. They find small efficiencies. They share labor quietly. They teach children early so strength multiplies sooner. They accept limits not as surrender, but as parameters within which life must function. Obligation becomes background noise, always present, rarely acknowledged, shaping everything without demanding attention. It defines the texture of the day more than any single command ever could. By the time evening arrives on such days, fatigue feels different. It is not only physical, it carries a muted emotional weight, the sense of time spent that cannot be recovered. And yet, There is relief too. The obligation has been met. For now. Tomorrow may belong more fully to your own survival, or it may not. This uncertainty is part of the system's design. It keeps attention focused on the present. Long-term imagining becomes difficult. Planning narrows. Life compresses into manageable units. Today's labor, tonight's rest, tomorrow's demand. Under feudalism, obligation is not a moment. It is a condition. It is written into the day before it begins, carried through the body as it works, and released only briefly at night, when darkness offers the illusion of time that belongs to no one. And it is from within this condition that people return home, not to escape power, but to live with it quietly until the day turns again. Part 5. Houses of smoke and straw. By the time the day's labor loosens its grip and bodies begin to turn back toward the village, the idea of home under feudalism carries none of the comfort it might suggest in later centuries. Home is not a retreat from the world. It is simply another part of it, smaller, darker, enclosed, but governed by the same rules of necessity and endurance. The house waits low against the ground, built not to impress, but to resist. Walls are thick with mud, timber, or stone, depending on what the land allows. Roofs are heavy with thatch, pressed down by years of rain and wind. They sag slightly, as though tired themselves, bearing the weight of seasons without complaint. There is no symmetry here, no planned beauty. Each structure grows the way it needs to, shaped by repair rather than design. Crossing the threshold feels less like entering a private space and more like stepping into a shared container of life. The air inside is warmer than outside, but heavier. Smoke clings stubbornly to the interior, lingering from the cooking fire that rarely fully dies. It seeps into wood, fabric, hair, and skin, becoming part of how people smell, how the house breathes. Light enters reluctantly. A small opening, sometimes no more than a hole shuttered with wood or cloth, allows daylight to filter in. Even at midday, shadows dominate. Corners dissolve into darkness. Objects are known by touch as much as sight. The house is navigated by memory, not illumination. There is little separation between functions here. Cooking, sleeping, storing, working, all happen within the same confined space. The hearth anchors the room, both physically and emotionally. It is the source of heat, of food, of limited light once the sun disappears. Everything arranges itself around it, as though orbiting a quiet center. Animals often share this space. Chickens roost nearby. A goat or pig may be brought inside during cold months. Their presence adds warmth, sound, and smell, but also a sense of continuity. Human life under feudalism does not insist on distance from the animal world. Survival depends on closeness, not separation. The floor is packed earth, worn smooth by countless feet. Straw is scattered where needed, refreshed when possible, reused until it breaks down completely. There is no expectation of cleanliness as an abstract ideal. Clean enough means functional. Clean enough means illness does not spread faster than usual. As evening approaches, the house fills. Bodies return from fields, workshops, and errands, carrying fatigue with them. Movements slow, postures soften. The rhythm of the day shifts inward, from outward exertion to containment. The soundscape changes too. Fewer wide-open noises, more enclosed ones. Breathing, small coughs, the crackle of firewood. Clothing is loosened, but not removed entirely. Warmth must be conserved. Garments are too valuable to treat carelessly. Each piece has required time, skill, and material to produce. Wool spun by hand, cloth woven slowly, repairs made repeatedly, stitches layered over older stitches until fabric thickens unevenly. Personal possessions are few, but they matter. A knife worn smooth by use, a wooden bowl bearing the marks of many meals, a small token, perhaps religious, perhaps inherited, kept close not for decoration, but for reassurance. These objects do not define identity, but they anchor it. Privacy, as a concept, barely exists. Conversations are overheard, sleep is shared, children grow up within constant proximity, learning early how to exist among others without claiming space as their own. Emotions are managed quietly because there is nowhere to hide them. Anger dissipates not through isolation, but through fatigue. Illness reveals the limits of the house most clearly. When someone falls sick, the space becomes both shelter and threat. Heat comforts, but smoke irritates. Closeness allows care, but also contagion. There is no separate room for recovery, no isolation. The household absorbs sickness the way it absorbs everything else. Collectively, without alternatives, night arrives gradually inside these walls. As daylight fades, the interior grows darker long before the outside world does. The fire becomes the primary source of visibility, its light unstable and flickering. Shadows stretch and collapse unpredictably. Faces are illuminated in fragments, a cheek, a brow, a hand, moving briefly through light before disappearing again. Evening meals are prepared slowly, with care shaped by habit rather than creativity. Food is warmed, bowls are filled. The act of eating here feels different than in the field. It is slower, more deliberate. Bodies settle. The day's exhaustion presses inward, encouraging silence. Stories are sometimes told, but not always. Silence is not awkward here. It is restful. The presence of others is enough. Words are saved for when they are needed most. Children listen more than they speak, absorbing patterns of speech, tone, and restraint. As sleep approaches, the house rearranges itself again. Straw is shifted, cloaks are used as blankets, bodies lie close, aligned for warmth more than comfort. The fire is banked, not extinguished entirely. Tomorrow will need it. The smell of smoke deepens at night. Without movement, it settles more heavily, pressing into lungs and dreams alike. Sleep comes unevenly. Some drift quickly into unconsciousness, claimed by fatigue. Others lie awake longer, listening to the sounds of the house, breathing, shifting, the quiet movement of animals nearby. Dreams, when they come, are shaped by the day just lived. Fields reappear, hunger intrudes, familiar tasks repeat in altered forms. There is little separation between waking and sleeping worlds. Both belong to the same cycle. Under feudalism, the house does not offer escape from labor or hierarchy. It offers continuity. It holds the body between days, preserves warmth, shelters life just enough to allow it to continue. Comfort, where it exists, is subtle. A shared fire, a full belly, the knowledge that the roof has held through another storm. As night deepens and the house settles fully into stillness, tomorrow waits quietly beyond the walls. The same fields, the same soil, the same obligations. And within this low, smoke-darkened space, life pauses, not to rest deeply, but to endure once more. Part 6. Time measured by bells. Time under feudalism does not move in minutes or hours. It moves in signals. You do not ask what time it is. You listen for it. Somewhere beyond the fields and rooftops, beyond the hedges and narrow paths, worn smooth by generations of feet, a bell waits. It hangs suspended in a wooden frame or stone tower, dark with age, its surface marked by rain and soot and touch. When it sounds, it does not simply announce the moment. It creates it. The bell cuts through air that has learned to expect it. Its voice is not sharp, but heavy, resonant, carrying farther than any human call. It rolls across fields, through trees, over low roofs, and into houses still half dark with smoke. It reaches those who are working and those who are still waking. It reaches even those who do not wish to hear it. This is how the day is divided. Morning prayer, midday pause, evening call, feast day, fast day, burial, celebration, warning. Each sound carries meaning, layered through repetition. You do not need to be told what the bell signifies. Your body responds before thought intervenes. Hands slow, heads lift, work pauses or resumes depending on the tone and timing. The bell is not a suggestion. It is a rhythm imposed gently but firmly upon life. Church time overlays natural time without fully replacing it. The sun still matters. Weather still matters. Seasons still dictate labor. But the bell adds another structure, one that binds individual days into a shared pattern, linking households into a single temporal body. Faith under feudalism is not primarily intellectual. It is practical. It organizes time. It tells you when to work, when to stop, when to eat less, when to gather, when to mourn. Belief is reinforced not through argument, but through habit. You believe because belief is built into the day's architecture. The church building itself stands differently from other structures. Its walls are thicker. Its roof rises higher. Its interior feels distinct, even when modest. Stone replaces mud. Space opens upward. Light behaves differently here, filtered through small windows, catching dust in slow-moving beams. The air smells of incense, wax, and old wood rather than smoke and animals. Entering this space changes posture. Shoulders lower, voices soften, movements slow further. Even those who do not feel deep devotion understand the rules of presence here. Sermons are long, but not always fully understood. Latin words drift over listeners who grasp tone more than meaning. The message arrives less through language and more through repetition, sin, humility, endurance, order. These ideas settle gradually, reinforced week after week, until they feel less like teachings and more like descriptions of reality. The calendar itself becomes sacred. Days are marked not by numbers, but by saints' names and holy observances. Certain days demand rest, even when rest feels impractical. Others demand fasting, even when hunger already presses hard. Time becomes moral. What you do on a given day carries spiritual weight, not just physical consequence. This structure offers comfort as well as control. In a world where weather can ruin a harvest and illness can take a life overnight, predictability matters. The church promises continuity beyond the fragile present. It offers a story that explains suffering without requiring resolution in this life. For many, this promise matters deeply. For others, it exists quietly in the background, neither questioned nor fully embraced. Faith is not always fervent. Often, it is simply there, woven into the fabric of the day like the bell itself. Children grow up absorbing this rhythm without instruction. They learn when to be silent, when to stand, when to kneel. They learn the sound of celebration and the sound of mourning before they understand their meanings. Memory forms around these signals, anchoring life to a cycle larger than any single household. The bell also marks transitions beyond daily routine. A death triggers a different sound, slower, heavier. Its tone travels differently, weighted with meaning. Work stops. Heads bow. Conversations hush. Even those at a distance understand what has occurred. The community adjusts itself in response. Festivals transform the bell's voice again. Faster peals, brighter rhythms. The sound lifts rather than settles. These moments break monotony without dissolving structure. Joy appears briefly, sanctioned, contained within specific boundaries. Time under feudalism feels communal. You do not experience it alone. Everyone moves together, guided by the same signals. Individual desires are absorbed into collective rhythm. Isolation, when it occurs, feels disorienting rather than liberating. As evening approaches, the bell gathers the day inward. Its sound softens labor, signaling closure without finality. Work winds down, fires are tended, meals are prepared, the light fades, and with it, the pace of movement. Night prayers mark the last formal division of the day. After this, time loosens slightly. Conversations linger, children drift into sleep. The bell falls silent, surrendering control back to darkness and fatigue. but even in silence, its presence remains. Tomorrow, it will sound again. It always does. Under feudalism, daily life is not governed by personal schedules or abstract systems. It is shaped by shared sound, repeated endlessly until it becomes invisible. Time is not owned. It is received, accepted, and endured. And as night settles fully over the village, the absence of the bell becomes its own signal, a reminder that rest, too, has its place within the long, unbroken rhythm of days. Part 7. Women's Days, Unseen and Unrecorded. If time under feudalism is measured by bells and seasons, women's lives are measured by accumulation, not by milestones, not by recognition, but by layers of tasks that settle one atop another until they become inseparable from the body itself. There is no clear beginning to a woman's workday, because much of it never truly ends. Morning does not introduce new duties. It simply resumes the ones left unfinished. Before the village fully stirs, women are already awake, not always because they choose to be, but because someone else must be. A child who cries in the night, an animal that needs tending, a fire that must be coaxed back to life before the day can begin at all. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by responsibility rather than noise. The hearth is often their first station. Ash is shifted. Embers are encouraged into flame. Smoke rises again, stinging eyes accustomed to irritation. Cooking does not begin with inspiration, but with inventory. A quiet assessment of what remains, what must be stretched, what cannot be replaced until another season allows it. Scarcity shapes creativity long before preference ever enters the equation. Water must be fetched. This task repeats endlessly, regardless of weather or fatigue. Buckets are heavy even when empty. Paths are familiar, worn smooth by countless trips. In winter, fingers numb quickly. In summer, the weight presses harder. This labor is invisible once completed, its result disappearing almost immediately into cooking, washing, drinking. Nothing about it feels finished. Children weave constantly through these movements. They are fed, cleaned, watched, redirected. Care is not an isolated activity. It is layered into every other task, performed simultaneously rather than sequentially. A pot is stirred while a child is held. Spinning continues while instructions are given. Attention splits without complaint because it must. Textile work fills countless hours. Wool is cleaned, carded, spun, woven. Each stage takes time and patience. Fingers learn the feel of fiber, the tension required to keep thread from breaking. This work produces no immediate nourishment, no visible survival, and yet, without it, clothing fails, warmth disappears, exposure becomes deadly. The value of this labor is understood even if it is rarely named. The repetitive motion of spinning creates a rhythm of its own. Hands move almost independently of thought. The mind drifts, returns, drifts again. This is where reflection often occurs, not in stillness, but in motion. Thoughts pass through without settling. Worries are acknowledged, not resolved. The work continues regardless. Women also labor in the fields. The distinction between domestic and agricultural work is thin at best. During planting and harvest, bodies are needed everywhere. Strength matters more than custom. Women bend, lift, carry, and endure alongside men, then return to the house to continue a second shift that no one else will assume. Pregnancy does not remove these obligations. It reshapes them slightly, but rarely eliminates them. Women work until they cannot, rest briefly, then resume. Birth itself is dangerous, unpredictable, often endured without professional assistance. Knowledge is passed from woman to woman, practical and unsentimental. Survival depends on shared experience rather than theory. Childbirth does not mark a pause. Recovery is expected to be swift. Infants are integrated into work routines almost immediately, carried on backs, set nearby, soothed between tasks. Maternal presence is constant, but not exclusive. Other women assist when they can. Community absorbs what individual bodies cannot always sustain. Illness complicates everything. When a woman falls sick, work does not disappear. It redistributes. Other women step in temporarily, absorbing additional labor into already full days. Care flows horizontally rather than upward. There is little expectation of external relief. Emotion is managed carefully. Open grief, anger, or despair must fit into narrow spaces. There is no room for extended withdrawal. Feelings are expressed quietly, often indirectly, through tone rather than words, through pace rather than declaration. Endurance becomes a form of emotional discipline. Older women hold particular weight within this structure. Their bodies may weaken, but their knowledge deepens. They remember seasons of scarcity, remedies that worked once, patterns others have not yet lived long enough to recognize. Their authority is informal, but real, rooted in experience rather than position. Girls learn early by watching. Instruction is rarely formal. Skills are absorbed through repetition, correction offered sparingly, mistakes are expected, but waste is not. Competence develops gradually, woven into identity before it is consciously chosen. There is little sense of individual destiny. Life unfolds within narrow expectations. Marriage, work, children, labor, aging. Variation exists, but not choice in the modern sense. Fulfillment, where it appears, comes from capability, from being needed, from keeping things functioning, from continuity. Moments of rest are brief and often shared. A pause by the fire, a quiet exchange while hands continue moving. Laughter appears unexpectedly, fleeting but genuine. Joy does not announce itself loudly. It slips in between tasks, light enough not to disrupt them. Religion intersects with women's lives in intimate ways. Prayer accompanies labor. Saints associated with childbirth, illness, and household protection are invoked quietly. Faith offers language for endurance, not escape. It frames suffering as meaningful rather than accidental. At the end of the day, exhaustion settles deeply. Bodies ache in layered ways. From lifting, bending, standing, carrying, hands feel swollen, backs stiffen, and yet tasks remain. Food must be prepared, children settled, the fire banked, tomorrow anticipated even before sleep arrives. History rarely records these days. Chronicles mention kings, wars, treaties. Women's labor leaves few marks on parchment. Its evidence exists instead in continuity, in villages that persist, in children who survive, in clothing worn thin and repaired again and again. Under feudalism, daily life for women is not a separate story running alongside history. It is the quiet structure that allows history to happen at all. Without this constant, unseen labor, fields would fail, households would collapse, and the system itself would unravel. As night closes in and the house grows still, women's work does not end so much as soften. It pauses just long enough to be resumed again before dawn. And in that pause, brief and fragile, endurance rests, not because it is finished, but because it must continue. Part 8. Childhood without shelter. Childhood under feudalism is not a protected season. It is a gradual entry into necessity. There is no clear moment when a child becomes useful, because usefulness arrives early and quietly. From the time a child can walk steadily, their presence begins to matter in practical ways. They carry small things. They watch younger siblings. They fetch water in vessels light enough for their strength. These actions are not framed as responsibility. They are simply part of being alive among others. The village does not organize itself around children. Children adapt to it. Mornings begin much the same for them as for adults, though their bodies rise with more reluctance, their movements slower to settle into rhythm. Sleep is often deep but short, interrupted by noise, hunger, or the shifting of bodies nearby. When they wake, there is no transition period, no space reserved for easing into the day. They are awake and therefore present. Play exists, but it is not separate from work. Games imitate adult tasks, carrying sticks like tools, pretending at cooking, herding imaginary animals along familiar paths. Laughter appears briefly, then fades as attention is redirected. Play does not happen instead of labor. It happens alongside it, filling gaps when hands are momentarily unneeded. Clothing for children mirrors that of adults in form, if not in size. It is sturdy, repaired often, and rarely replaced unless growth demands it. Shoes, when they exist, are precious. Bare feet are common, hardened early against cold ground and sharp edges. The body learns its limits through contact rather than caution. Food teaches lessons quickly. Children learn which foods are scarce, which are reserved, which are not to be asked for twice. They learn to eat what is given without expectation of preference. Hunger is introduced gently, then reinforced steadily. It becomes familiar before it becomes frightening. Learning happens informally through observation and repetition. There are no classrooms for most. Knowledge is practical. How to recognize weather patterns, how to avoid angering animals, how to hold a tool safely. Stories are absorbed through overheard conversation, not instruction. History arrives as memory rather than narrative. Discipline is direct and situational. Correction comes immediately, often physically, but not always harshly. The goal is not moral development as an abstract concept. It is safety, efficiency, survival. A mistake that leads to injury or waste carries real consequences. Lessons learned this way stay learned. Illness weighs heavily on childhood. Fevers are common, injuries frequent. The body is resilient, but fragile. Care is given when possible, but resources are limited. Recovery depends as much on fortune as attention. Death is not hidden from children. They witness it early, absorbing its presence as part of the world rather than an exception to it. Grief is communal but restrained. When a child is lost, the village feels the absence sharply, then moves forward because it must. There is little space for prolonged mourning. Survival demands continuation. Children learn this not through explanation, but through example. Faith enters childhood through ritual more than doctrine. Children learn when to kneel, when to stand, when to be silent. They associate bells with gathering, candles with solemnity, hymns with stillness. Meaning arrives later, if at all. The rhythm is learned first. As children grow, tasks increase gradually. Strength is tested carefully. Boys and girls both work, though expectations diverge over time. Boys are drawn more toward field labor and animal care, girls toward domestic and textile work. These divisions are not absolute, but they become more defined with age. Adolescence does not announce itself dramatically. There is no clear threshold, no ceremonial passage for most. The body changes, responsibilities expand. Childhood dissolves quietly into labor. By the time youth recognizes what has been lost, it is already gone. Moments of tenderness exist. An older sibling teaching a younger one, a parent sharing a small indulgence, a rare toy fashioned from scraps. These moments do not define childhood, but they soften it. They offer brief shelter without creating illusion. Danger is constant, but normalized. Open fires, sharp tools, large animals. Children learn caution through proximity rather than restriction. Accidents are expected. Survival depends on learning quickly, not on preventing all risk. At night, children sleep where space allows. Privacy is non-existent. Dreams are shaped by the day's impressions, work, hunger, voices, shadows. Fear appears sometimes, especially in darkness, but reassurance is brief. The night must be endured like everything else. Under feudalism, childhood is not romanticized. It is not designed to prepare children for a different future. It prepares them for the same life they already inhabit. Skills learned early are the same ones required later. Continuity matters more than development. And yet, within this narrow frame, children adapt remarkably. They grow competent, aware, resilient. Their understanding of the world is grounded, not hopeful, but stable. They know what is expected of them. They know where they belong. As they fall asleep, pressed among others, the future does not stretch wide before them. It settles close, familiar, already shaped. Tomorrow will resemble today closely enough to require no imagination. This is childhood without shelter, not unloved, but unprotected, a quiet apprenticeship in endurance, carried forward one small task at a time, until childhood itself fades into the steady labor of life. Part 9. Illness, Pain, and Small Remedies. Illness under feudalism is not an interruption to life. It is one of its regular features. Bodies break down early and often. Work wears them thin. Cold settles into joints. Cuts fester. Fevers arrive without warning and leave without explanation, if they leave at all. Pain is not something to be eliminated. It is something to be endured, interpreted, and managed within narrow limits. There is no clear boundary between health and sickness. Most people live somewhere in between, functioning, but never fully well. A persistent ache in the back, a cough that lingers through seasons, fingers stiffened by years of cold and labor. These conditions are not named as illnesses. They are simply part of being alive. When more serious sickness appears, the household adjusts quietly. Work redistributes. Tasks are absorbed by others already burdened. No one asks whether this is fair. Survival requires flexibility, not balance. The sick person is not removed from daily life. They remain within it, lying near the hearth, listening to the sounds of work continuing around them. Care is practical rather than comforting. Warmth is offered first. Extra straw, closer placement to the fire. Food is adjusted if possible. Thin broths replace coarse bread. Water is warmed. These changes are small, but they matter. They signal attention within limits. Remedies are drawn from memory and tradition. Herbs gathered from hedges and fields. Poultices made from plants known to soothe, if not cure. Honey for wounds. Garlic for infection. Knowledge circulates informally, passed from older women to younger ones, refined through experience rather than written instruction. Some treatments are gentle, others are harsh. Bloodletting is common, believed to rebalance the body. Cupping leaves dark marks on skin. Leeches are applied carefully. These practices are not acts of cruelty. They are attempts at control in a world where causes are invisible and outcomes uncertain. Prayer accompanies treatment naturally, not as a last resort, but as a parallel effort. Saints associated with illness are invoked. Candles are lit. Words are spoken softly near the body. Faith does not replace action. It surrounds it, framing sickness as something meaningful rather than random. Pain is expressed cautiously. Loud suffering draws attention, but attention does not guarantee relief. Stoicism is learned early, reinforced socially. Those who endure quietly are admired. Those who complain excessively risk being seen as weak or disruptive. Emotional control becomes a survival skill. Injuries from work are frequent. A slip with a blade, a fall from a ladder, a hoof striking unexpectedly. These moments are dangerous not only because of the injury itself, but because of what follows. Infection spreads easily. Healing is slow. A damaged limb can threaten an entire household's stability. Recovery is measured in function, not comfort. A person is considered healed when they can work again, even if pain remains. Returning too early is risky, but waiting too long is often impossible. The balance between caution and necessity is negotiated constantly. Children experience illness differently. Their bodies recover faster, but they are more vulnerable. Fevers can carry them away quickly. Care intensifies when a child is sick, but resources are limited. Loss is accepted not because it is easy, but because it is familiar. Death visits often enough to feel present, but not often enough to feel ordinary. When it comes, it reshapes the household immediately. Labor gaps appear. Roles shift. Grief is real, but brief. Survival demands continuation. There is no expectation of medical authority. Healers exist, but they are not universally accessible or trusted. Some are respected for their knowledge, others are avoided. Treatment varies widely by region and custom. Consistency is rare. Mental suffering is not distinguished clearly from physical illness. Sadness, fear, despair are interpreted through spiritual language or absorbed into daily hardship. There is little space to dwell on internal states. Life presses outward too strongly. Despite these limitations, care does exist. Touch matters. Presence matters. Someone sits nearby. Someone listens. Someone takes over a task. These gestures do not cure illness, but they soften it. They remind the sick person that they remain part of the household's fabric. When recovery comes, it is quiet. Strength returns gradually. Tasks resume slowly. There is no celebration. Illness leaving is as unremarkable as its arrival. Life continues. Under feudalism, sickness does not halt the world. It bends it slightly, briefly, before routine asserts itself again. Bodies are fragile, but systems are resilient. Pain is expected. Relief is uncertain. Endurance remains the primary remedy. And so illness passes through daily life like weather, sometimes mild, sometimes devastating, always reminding those who live within it that survival is provisional, negotiated day by day through care, effort, and quiet persistence. Part 10. Winter inside the walls. Winter under feudalism is not a season you pass through. It is a condition you inhabit. Long before the cold arrives in full force, the village prepares itself quietly. There are no dramatic announcements, no sudden shifts. The change is felt first in the body, in joints that stiffen more quickly, in breath that grows visible earlier in the morning, in the way daylight shortens without apology. Everyone knows what is coming, because it has always come. By the time winter settles fully, the world narrows. Fields fall silent. The soil hardens, sealed beneath frost. Tools are cleaned, repaired, set aside. Work does not disappear, but it turns inward, drawn back behind walls that were never meant to hold warmth comfortably. Life compresses, pulling people closer together, reducing movement, conserving energy. Inside the house, the fire becomes everything. It is warmth, light, and reassurance all at once. Its presence determines where people sit, where they sleep, where they linger. The hearth is fed carefully, not generously. Wood is precious. Each log represents time spent gathering, hauling, splitting. Fires are coaxed, not indulged. Flames are kept low, controlled, encouraged to last rather than blaze brightly. Smoke thickens in winter, with doors closed and openings sealed against cold. Air circulation weakens. Eyes sting. Throats grow dry. Coughs become common. The smell of soot and damp wool saturates everything. It settles into hair, skin, fabric. Winter smells like confinement. Clothing layers increase, but protection remains imperfect. Wool insulates, but it also traps moisture. When it becomes damp, it chills rather than warms. Boots leak. Gloves are rare. Fingers grow numb quickly, losing dexterity. Simple tasks take longer, demand more effort. Everything slows. Food supplies are tested relentlessly. What was stored in autumn now determines survival. Grain is measured carefully. Root vegetables soften in storage pits. Preserved meats, if they exist at all, are rationed cautiously. Nothing is eaten casually. Every meal is weighed against the weeks remaining until spring. Hunger sharpens in winter, not because food disappears entirely, but because energy demands increase while supplies diminish. Cold consumes calories invisibly. Bodies require more, even as less is available. The result is a steady draining of strength, of patience, of resilience. Days shorten dramatically. Darkness arrives early, pressing against the house while work still remains. Candlelight is weak and costly. Most tasks are adjusted to daylight hours. Evenings grow longer, quieter, heavier. People sit close, conserving warmth, conserving motion. Conversation changes in winter. It grows slower, more deliberate. Stories are repeated because new ones are unnecessary. Memory fills the space that novelty once occupied. The past becomes useful, a way to occupy time without spending energy. Children feel winter acutely. Their bodies are smaller, their reserves thinner. They huddle closer, sleep longer, move less. Play recedes almost entirely, replaced by stillness enforced by cold. Illness spreads more easily in this closeness. Fevers linger, recovery slows. For the elderly, winter is dangerous. Cold seeps into bones already weakened. A minor sickness can turn fatal quickly. There is no illusion of safety. Each winter is faced with quiet calculation. Who is strong enough to endure it, and who may not be? Work continues indoors where possible. Tools are repaired, baskets woven, cloth spun. These tasks occupy hands while conserving strength. They produce little immediate benefit, but they sustain the sense of usefulness that keeps despair from taking hold completely. Time feels different in winter. Without fields demanding attention, days blur together. Bells still ring, but their signals feel muted, less urgent. The world seems paused, suspended between what was and what will be. Waiting becomes a primary activity. Faith takes on heavier significance. Prayer deepens, not always in intensity, but in frequency. Churches feel colder, quieter, more solemn. Candles flicker weakly against stone walls. Sermons dwell on endurance, on suffering, on reward deferred. These messages resonate more strongly when hardship presses close. Snow transforms the landscape into something unfamiliar. Paths vanish, boundaries blur, travel becomes difficult, sometimes impossible. Isolation increases, villages turn inward, each becoming its own small universe of shared struggle. Silence grows thick, wind replaces birdsong, nights stretch long and uninterrupted. Sleep comes early, not because people are rested, but because darkness leaves few alternatives. Dreams grow vivid, shaped by hunger and confinement. Anxiety surfaces more easily in stillness. Winter exposes the fragility of feudal life more clearly than any other season. There is no surplus to cushion failure. A single bad harvest echoes through months of cold. Mistakes made in planning cannot be corrected until spring, and sometimes not even then. And yet, winter also reinforces community. Shared hardship tightens bonds. People rely on one another more visibly. A shared fire, a shared meal, a shared silence. These moments do not erase suffering, but they make it bearable. When a storm passes and the sky clears, the brightness of snow reflects light in unexpected ways. For a brief moment, the world seems clean, almost gentle. These moments are noticed, held briefly, then released. Beauty exists, but it is fleeting. As winter deepens, endurance becomes quieter. There is less talk of the future. Survival narrows to the present, to today's meal, tonight's fire, tomorrow's strength. Spring exists as an idea more than a certainty. Under feudalism, winter inside the walls is not merely cold weather. It is a sustained test of preparation, restraint, and patience. It strips life down to essentials and asks whether those essentials will be enough. And as the fire burns low and bodies settle closer together, the night presses in, not as an enemy, but as a reality to be endured, one long, dark hour at a time. Part 11. Market days and rare movement. Movement under feudalism is limited, repetitive, and tightly bound to necessity. Most days unfold within the same narrow geography, the house, the field, the path between them. Distance is not imagined as freedom, but as risk. Leaving the familiar carries cost, uncertainty, and exposure. And yet, there are moments when the ordinary boundaries loosen slightly, when the world expands just enough to remind people that life extends beyond their immediate horizon. Market day is one of those moments. It does not arrive suddenly. It announces itself gradually, through preparation rather than anticipation. Goods are gathered carefully in advance, not excess, but surplus measured cautiously. A bundle of wool spun slowly over weeks, a small basket of eggs, a length of cloth, a tool repaired well enough to trade. Nothing taken to market is casual. Each item represents time already spent, effort already absorbed. The morning of market day feels different even before anyone leaves the village. Movement quickens slightly. Clothing is adjusted with marginal care. Faces are washed more thoroughly. There is no desire to impress, but there is an awareness of being seen. The market is one of the few places where strangers gather, where anonymity exists briefly, where reputation travels faster than memory. The road itself matters. Paths widen gradually as people converge from surrounding villages. Footsteps multiply. Carts creak under uneven weight. Animals pull steadily, accustomed to slow progress. Travel is tiring, not exhilarating. Distance is measured in fatigue rather than miles. Sounds change as the market approaches. Voices grow louder. Accents vary. Laughter appears unexpectedly. The air feels fuller, charged with presence. For many, this is the largest gathering they will see for weeks, sometimes months. The density of people feels almost overwhelming at first. The market space itself is not orderly. Stalls cluster loosely. Goods are laid out simply. Cloth folded over rough tables, produce piled in baskets, tools displayed openly. There is no standardized pricing. Value is negotiated face to face, shaped by scarcity, reputation, and need. Haggling is not aggressive. It is practical, often quiet, conducted with an understanding that neither side can afford to lose too much. Smells overlap heavily here. Animals, food cooking nearby, human bodies, leather, metal, smoke. The mixture is dense, confusing, invigorating in small doses, exhausting over time. For those accustomed to quieter spaces, the market can feel overwhelming. Too many voices, too many movements, too many demands on attention. Goods that rarely appear elsewhere become visible here. Salt, precious and necessary. Iron tools of better quality. Occasionally spices or dried fruits carried from far away, their origins more imagined than understood. These items remind people that their lives exist within a larger network, even if that network remains abstract. Information travels alongside goods. News spreads unevenly, distorted slightly with each retelling. A poor harvest elsewhere, a dispute between lords. Rumors of war. These stories are not consumed eagerly. They are weighed cautiously. News can change obligations, alter risks, reshape survival. Knowing too much can be as dangerous as knowing nothing. Money exists, but it does not dominate. Coins change hands, but barter remains common. Trust matters. Familiar faces matter. Credit exists informally, tracked by memory rather than record. Debts linger quietly, shaping future interactions. For some, the market offers brief social freedom. Young people linger longer than necessary. Glances are exchanged. Conversations extend beyond transactions. Courtship begins not through romance, but through proximity. These moments are fragile, constrained by time and expectation. The market does not suspend social rules, but it softens them briefly. Children experience market day with wide attention. Colors stand out more sharply. Sounds linger longer. The world feels larger, more varied. These impressions stay with them, shaping their understanding of possibility, even if those possibilities remain out of reach. As the day progresses, energy drains. The initial excitement fades. Bodies tire. Goods diminish. Decisions must be finalized. Lingering becomes costly. Travel home still awaits, and fatigue compounds with distance. Leaving the market feels quieter than arriving. Paths thin gradually as groups separate, each returning to their own contained lives. The sounds recede. The world narrows again. Goods acquired are carried carefully, protected against loss or damage. Each item now holds heightened significance because it represents both effort and movement. Returning to the village brings relief. Familiar ground steadies the body. Known routines reassert themselves quickly. New items are integrated cautiously, tested, saved, rationed. Stories of the market are shared briefly, then fade. Life resumes its previous shape with little visible alteration. Market day does not change feudal life fundamentally, it interrupts it. These interruptions matter more than they appear. They prevent isolation from becoming complete. They offer confirmation that the world is wider, even if one rarely enters it. They remind people that their labor connects, however distantly, to others doing similar work under similar constraints. Under feudalism, daily life rarely includes travel, novelty, or expansion. When it does, the experience is contained, controlled, absorbed without destabilizing the system. Movement exists, but it does not promise escape. It offers perspective instead, brief, grounding, and quickly folded back into routine. And as evening settles after market day, fatigue presses heavier than usual. The body carries not only labor, but experience. Sleep comes deeply, filled with unfamiliar images that dissolve by morning. By the next day, the fields wait again, unchanged. Movement has occurred. The world has widened, then closed, and life continues, steady as ever, within its narrow, enduring bounds. Part 12. Violence at the edge of life. Violence under feudalism does not dominate every day, but it is never far away. It exists at the edges of life, quiet and conditional, shaping behavior through its possibility rather than its constant presence. Most people do not live in a state of continual fear. They live in a state of awareness, an understanding that stability is provisional and that force can intrude when order weakens. Daily life is built to avoid violence where possible. Routine itself is a form of protection. Predictability reduces risk. Everyone knows where they belong, what is expected, how far they can go without consequence. Most conflict is managed through custom, mediation, and hierarchy long before it becomes physical. And yet, the system rests on force. Punishment is visible enough to be remembered. A fine imposed publicly, a tool confiscated, a brief but humiliating beating, stocks placed in the village square. These acts are not meant to correct the individual alone. They are meant to instruct the community. Justice under feudalism is performative, not hidden. Its power lies in being witnessed. The body becomes a site of consequence. Pain is understood as corrective, not cruel. Excessive punishment is discouraged not out of compassion, but because it destabilizes labor. A broken body cannot work. Violence is calibrated carefully, restrained by practicality rather than mercy. Serious crimes, theft beyond necessity, repeated defiance, violence against authority, carry harsher outcomes. Exile is feared more than punishment. To be removed from the protection of village and lord is to face the world alone, exposed to hunger, strangers, and uncertainty. Belonging, even under constraint, is safer than freedom without shelter. War exists mostly at a distance, but its shadow stretches far. When conflict between lords erupts, it rarely resembles heroic combat. It arrives instead as requisition, disruption, and fear. Crops are trampled, livestock seized, young men are taken temporarily, sometimes permanently. News of violence travels ahead of it, reshaping behavior before armies ever appear. Raids are the most terrifying form of violence because they break routine without warning. A neighboring lord's men, a band of mercenaries, a sudden incursion driven by hunger or ambition. These moments are chaotic, brief, and deeply disruptive. Homes are violated, food stores vanish, stability collapses in hours. In these moments, the fragility of feudal protection becomes visible. Lords cannot always respond in time. Promises of safety reveal their limits. People learn quickly that survival depends as much on luck as on loyalty. After violence passes, recovery is slow. Losses are absorbed quietly. Complaints are useless. There is no compensation beyond what the community can muster itself. Labor resumes because it must. Trauma is not named, but it lingers. In altered behavior, in heightened caution, in silence where there was once routine speech. Weapons are present, but not celebrated. Knives are tools first. clubs and spears are kept for emergencies. Only those tied to authority train regularly for combat. Most people encounter violence as victims or witnesses, not participants. There is no romance in it. Children learn about violence indirectly. They overhear stories. They witness punishment. They sense fear before understanding it. These lessons are not designed to frighten them, but to prepare them. Innocence is shaped early into caution. Gender shapes exposure differently. Men face greater expectation of physical confrontation during conflict. Women face vulnerability of another kind, displacement, loss of protection, increased burden when men are absent or killed. Violence redistributes labor as much as it redistributes fear. Religion frames violence morally. Just war is distinguished from crime. Punishment is explained as order rather than cruelty. Suffering is contextualized within divine structure. These explanations do not erase pain, but they offer language to contain it. Most days, violence remains distant. Fields are worked, meals are eaten, bells ring as usual. This normality is not ignorance, it is resilience. People learn to live fully despite risk, not by denying it, but by narrowing their focus to what can be controlled. The edge of violence sharpens most clearly during times of scarcity. Hunger increases theft. Cold increases desperation. Social tolerance thins. Authority tightens. Punishments grow harsher, not because people become cruel, but because fear rises quietly. Under feudalism, peace is not an abstract ideal. It is a practical condition maintained through balance, restraint, and memory. Everyone knows what happens when balance fails. And so daily life continues with careful steps, not timid, but aware, not fearless, but steady. Violence exists as a boundary, rarely crossed, always visible. It shapes posture, speech, and decision without dominating them. It teaches caution without erasing dignity. It reminds those who live under feudalism that survival is not guaranteed, but negotiated day by day within a world that can harden suddenly when order slips. At the edge of life, violence waits, not constantly, but patiently. And knowing this, people endure, work, care, and sleep with a quiet attentiveness that becomes second nature, woven into the fabric of ordinary days. Part 13. Aging under feudalism. Aging under feudalism does not arrive as a separate stage of life. It unfolds gradually, almost invisibly, layered into routine until the body itself becomes the record of time past. There is no retirement, no clear moment when labor ends and rest begins. Aging is not a transition, it is an accumulation. The first signs are subtle. Strength takes slightly longer to return after rest. Joints stiffen more deeply in the cold. Tasks that were once performed without thought now require attention. None of this is spoken aloud. To name decline is to acknowledge vulnerability, and vulnerability has practical consequences. Work adjusts quietly. Heavy labor is shared more often. Certain tasks are avoided when possible. Older bodies are not discarded, but they are repositioned. Experience becomes their currency. Knowledge replaces speed. Memory replaces force. Elders rise early, not because they must, but because sleep loosens its hold more easily. Nights grow longer, interrupted by discomfort, by thought, by memories that surface uninvited. Morning light is greeted with familiarity rather than anticipation. Another day has arrived. That is enough. Pain becomes a constant companion, not sharp, not dramatic, but persistent. Knees ache, backs resist straightening, hands stiffen, fingers swollen and less precise. These changes are accepted as natural rather than tragic. The body has worked hard. This is its response. Older men remain involved in field work when they can, though their pace slows. They are given tasks that require judgment more than strength, watching boundaries, guiding younger workers, tending animals. Their authority does not come from position, but from endurance. They have lasted. That matters. Older women carry an even heavier weight of continuity. Their labor shifts, but it does not lighten. They supervise, advise, correct. They remember remedies, rituals, Seasons of scarcity survived before. Their bodies may weaken, but their value increases in quieter ways. They are consulted even when not openly praised. Grandparents live close to children, often within the same crowded space. Generations overlap physically as well as emotionally. There is no separation between youth and age. Children learn what aging looks like early, not as decline alone, but as persistence shaped by limitation. Food allocation shifts subtly. Elders may eat slightly less, not because they are less deserving, but because they choose to yield. Hunger is managed through quiet sacrifice rather than negotiation. These gestures are rarely acknowledged. They are understood. Illness complicates aging more severely. Recovery slows. Minor injuries linger. A fall can change everything. Households adjust cautiously, aware that one weakened body can destabilize the delicate balance of labor and care. Fear does not dominate, but awareness sharpens. There is no expectation of comfort in old age. There is hope only for continuity, to remain useful, to remain present, to avoid becoming a burden. Dignity under feudalism is not tied to leisure. It is tied to contribution, however altered. Memory takes on greater importance with age. Elders carry the village's lived history, past famines, old disputes, land boundaries, forgotten customs. This knowledge is practical. It prevents mistakes. It anchors identity. Written records are rare. Memory fills the gap. Conversation with elders feels different. It slows. Pauses lengthen. Stories repeat. These repetitions are not irritating. They are confirmations of survival, of meaning extracted from endurance. Each retelling reinforces belonging. Faith deepens or softens with age. Prayer becomes more frequent, less urgent. Fear of death exists, but it is tempered by familiarity. Elders have seen death often. They understand its patterns. It no longer surprises them. Sleep changes. Dreams become vivid, sometimes unsettling. The past reappears more often than the future. Regret surfaces quietly, not as despair, but as reflection. Life is reviewed, not for judgment, but for understanding. There is little space for loneliness in feudal households. Privacy is rare. Even when elders feel isolated internally, they are rarely alone physically. Presence substitutes for companionship. Touch, proximity, shared silence carry meaning words no longer need to convey. As strength diminishes further, elders spend more time near the hearth. Their movements shrink to smaller spaces. Their voices grow softer. Their influence, however, does not disappear. Decisions still consider their perspective. Custom demands it. When death approaches, it is not hidden. The body signals clearly. Work redistributes again. Care intensifies briefly. There is no prolonged medical struggle, no attempt to delay the inevitable beyond reason. Acceptance arrives gradually, shared by household and individual alike. Under feudalism, aging is not a private journey. It is communal. The body's decline is absorbed into collective routine. No one ages alone. No one ages easily. And in this slow narrowing of physical capacity, life does not end abruptly. It contracts gently, settling closer to the fire, closer to memory, closer to stillness. Aging becomes a quiet testament to endurance, not heroic, not celebrated, but deeply respected in its persistence. This is what it means to grow old under feudalism, not to step away from life, but to remain within it, contributing differently, until the body itself decides the work is done. Part 14. Death as a familiar guest. Death under feudalism does not arrive as a rupture. It enters as a presence already known. From childhood onward, people live alongside it, not morbidly, not obsessively, but attentively. Death is not hidden behind walls or softened by distance. It appears in the house, in the field, in the churchyard. It is woven into daily awareness so thoroughly that it loses the shock it carries in societies where it is rarely seen. This familiarity does not make death easier. It makes it quieter. Most deaths are anticipated rather than sudden. Illness lingers. Bodies weaken visibly. Breath shortens. The household notices the signs and adjusts without announcement. Work is redistributed again. Someone sits closer to the hearth. Food is prepared differently. Attention shifts inward. There is no dramatic vigil. Presence itself becomes the vigil. The dying person is not isolated. They remain among others, hearing the familiar sounds of life continuing. The crackle of the fire, the movement of feet, the soft exchanges of voices. These sounds do not insult death. They accompany it. The world does not stop because one body is leaving it. Prayer enters more fully at this stage, but it does not overwhelm. Words are spoken softly, sometimes repetitively, more for comfort than conviction. The rituals surrounding death are known well enough that they require little explanation. Candles are lit. Certain phrases are repeated. The structure is familiar, reassuring in its predictability. Fear exists, but it is rarely theatrical. The fear is not of the unknown so much as of the moment itself, of pain, of separation, of unfinished obligations. Many worry less about dying than about what will follow for those left behind. Survival is collective. One absence can strain the entire structure. When death arrives, it is marked by stillness rather than noise. Breathing stops. The body rests. There is a pause, brief and heavy, as the household acknowledges what has occurred. Grief does not erupt immediately. Practical concerns surface first. The body must be prepared. The bell must be rung. The community must be informed. Death reorganizes time instantly. The bell's sound changes when someone has died. Its slower rhythm carries farther, weighted with meaning. People recognize it without being told. Work pauses. Heads bow. Movement slows across the village, as though the sound itself presses downward. The body is washed carefully, with respect shaped by custom rather than sentimentality. Clothing is adjusted. Hands are folded. These actions are not expressions of denial. They are acknowledgments. The body is no longer working. It must be treated differently now. Burial follows quickly. There is no extended waiting. The earth is ready. The grave is prepared by familiar hands, often those who worked beside the deceased days earlier. This closeness between life and death feels natural, not cruel. The same soil that fed the body now receives it. Funerals are communal but restrained. The church gathers people together in shared silence. Words are spoken about humility, about endurance, about the soul's passage. These messages are not meant to console deeply. They are meant to situate loss within a framework that can be carried forward. Grief unfolds quietly after burial. There is little space for prolonged mourning. Labor waits. Fields do not pause. Animals still need tending. Hunger does not recede. Life presses forward gently but firmly, carrying grief with it rather than allowing it to stand alone. This does not mean loss is forgotten. Absence is felt most sharply in routine. A place by the fire remains empty. A familiar task goes undone until someone else learns it. Memory surfaces unexpectedly, triggered by habit rather than reflection. Children learn about death not through explanation, but through observation. They watch adults adjust. They feel the change in atmosphere. They absorb the lesson that life continues even as it diminishes. This lesson stays with them. Death under feudalism is also shaped by inequality. The poor die more often, younger, with less attention beyond the immediate household. The wealthy die with greater ceremony, their passing marked more visibly. Yet in the ground, these distinctions soften. Earth receives bodies without preference. Plague disrupts this balance entirely. When disease spreads rapidly, death becomes overwhelming rather than familiar. Burials quicken. Ritual compresses. Fear rises. In these moments, the system strains under the weight of loss. Normal patterns fracture. People withdraw or cling closer together, uncertain which instinct will protect them better. After such crises pass, memory of death lingers longer. Behavior shifts subtly. Caution increases. Gratitude appears briefly, then fades. Survival resumes its ordinary pace. Faith offers language for death, but it does not eliminate its impact. Heaven, purgatory, judgment, these concepts frame loss without erasing it. They provide orientation rather than relief. For many, belief comforts less by promising reunion than by insisting that death is not meaningless. Older generations approach death differently than the young. Elders see it as a completion rather than a theft. They have lived fully within the limits allowed to them. Regret exists, but it is quieter, less urgent. Acceptance grows not from wisdom, but from exhaustion. Younger deaths feel sharper. The loss of potential weighs heavily, even in a society where potential is narrowly defined. These deaths disturb routine more deeply. They leave gaps that are harder to fill. Grief lasts longer, even if it remains unspoken. Under feudalism, death is not a private experience. It belongs to the community. One body leaving changes the rhythm of many lives. No one dies alone, and no one is unaffected. And yet, death does not dominate daily life. It coexists with it. It appears, reshapes, then recedes. People learn to hold awareness of mortality without letting it consume them. This balance between familiarity and fear, between ritual and reality, defines the relationship with death under feudalism. It is close enough to demand respect, distant enough to allow endurance. As night falls after a burial, the village settles again. The bell falls silent. The fire burns low. The earth holds one more body, and life, unchanged and altered at once, continues forward, carrying memory quietly, as it always has. Part 15. What remains when the day ends? By the time a feudal day draws to its close, there is no sense of completion, only continuation, paused briefly by darkness. Life under feudalism does not resolve itself at sunset. It folds inward, gathering what remains of strength and warmth, and waits to unfold again at first light. Evening arrives quietly. The sky dims without ceremony. Shadows lengthen across the village paths, then dissolve entirely. The last tasks of the day are finished not with relief, but with resignation. Tools are set aside where they will be found again tomorrow. Animals are secured. Fires are banked carefully, coaxed into a state that promises morning embers without wasting fuel. Inside the house, the world contracts once more. Bodies gather close. The day's fatigue settles deeply, pressing down through muscle and bone. There is a particular heaviness that comes at this hour. Not dramatic exhaustion, but the kind that seeps inward, dulling sensation and quieting thought. Words grow fewer, movements slow. The final meal resembles the ones before it, but it carries a different weight. It is eaten not to continue working, but to endure the night. Portions are measured carefully. The body receives what it needs to rest, not to thrive. Hunger loosens slightly, retreating into the background where it will wait until dawn. Conversation, if it happens at all, drifts toward the practical. Tomorrow's weather, a task unfinished, a reminder spoken softly so it will not be forgotten by morning. Stories are repeated, not because there is nothing new to say, but because repetition itself is grounding. Familiar words reassure more than novelty ever could. Children are settled first, though sleep does not always come easily. The dark invites imagination. Shadows stretch unpredictably across walls. Familiar sounds shift at night, becoming unfamiliar. Reassurance is brief, a hand placed gently, a quiet word spoken. Fear is acknowledged, but not indulged. The night must be faced, like everything else. Adults follow slowly, arranging themselves within limited space. Cloaks become blankets. Straw shifts again beneath weight. Bodies align for warmth rather than comfort. Privacy is surrendered completely to necessity. This closeness is not intimacy in the modern sense. It is survival made physical. As the fire dims, the house grows quieter. Smoke settles low. Breathing synchronizes unconsciously. The world outside recedes, replaced by the small, enclosed reality of shared presence. Sleep arrives unevenly. Some fall quickly, claimed by exhaustion. Others drift in and out, half aware, listening to the subtle sounds of the house. Dreams under feudalism are shaped by repetition. Fields reappear, tasks continue, hunger intrudes. The boundaries between waking and sleeping worlds blur. There is little fantasy here, little escape. Even the imagination remains tethered to the known. Night is not feared, but it is respected. Darkness limits movement. Danger increases when vision fails. Rest becomes the safest course of action. The world waits. And yet, even in stillness, the system endures. Tomorrow's obligations remain fixed. The land will require attention again. The bell will sound. Hunger will return. None of this feels oppressive in the moment. It feels inevitable. What remains when the day ends is not despair, nor hope in the modern sense. It is endurance. Feudal life does not encourage reflection as a separate activity. There is little time to sit and evaluate existence. Meaning is extracted gradually, indirectly, through continuity. Survival itself becomes proof of worth. Persistence becomes identity. People do not ask whether their lives matter. The question does not arise. Life matters because it continues, because it feeds others, because it occupies space within a shared structure that depends on each part functioning well enough. Faith threads through this ending quietly. Prayer is not always spoken aloud. Sometimes it appears as habit, a gesture, a phrase half remembered, a moment of stillness before sleep. Faith does not promise change. It promises order beyond immediate experience. For many, that is enough. Memory lingers most strongly at night. Past seasons surface, losses remembered, moments of rare joy revisited briefly. These thoughts do not overwhelm. They pass through gently, like weather moving across the mind. There is little energy to dwell on regret. The body insists on rest. Across the village, similar scenes unfold simultaneously. Fires dim together. Voices fall silent together. Sleep claims bodies at different moments, but within the same narrow window of time. The community settles as a whole, bound by shared rhythm even in unconsciousness. This synchronization is not planned. It emerges naturally from shared constraints. Everyone rises early because daylight demands it. Everyone sleeps early because darkness enforces it. Individual variation exists, but it remains contained. When night deepens fully, the world feels suspended. The fields disappear into shadow. Paths vanish. Boundaries soften. For a few hours, hierarchy matters less. Lords sleep as peasants sleep, differently, but not entirely removed from vulnerability. Cold, illness, and uncertainty do not respect rank. This shared fragility does not create equality, but it reminds everyone that endurance is universal. Under feudalism, daily life does not build toward transformation. It circles, seasons turn, generations replace one another. Tools wear down and are remade. Houses sag and are repaired. The system persists, not because it is perfect, but because it adapts just enough to survive. What remains when the day ends is the quiet knowledge that tomorrow will resemble today closely enough to require no planning. This predictability comforts even as it confines. It reduces anxiety by narrowing expectation. There is relief in knowing what will be asked of you. As sleep settles fully, consciousness loosens its grip. The body rests not because it is safe, but because it must. The world holds steady, just enough. If you step back from this life and observe it as a whole, its meaning does not lie in progress or achievement. It lies in continuity, in the unbroken chain of days endured, tasks repeated, care given quietly without recognition. Feudal life leaves few monuments. It produces few names remembered centuries later. Its legacy exists instead in landscapes shaped slowly by human hands, in customs layered one atop another, in rhythms that echo faintly even in modern life. When the final breath leaves a body shaped by this world, little remains to mark the passing, and yet everything that came before has already left its imprint. in soil turned again and again, in children raised into the same routines, in memory carried forward without words. If you have drifted alongside this life long enough to feel its weight, you understand now that feudalism was not merely a system of land and obligation. It was a texture of existence, slow, restrained, resilient. And as this final night settles, carrying all the nights before it, the world does not conclude. It rests briefly before beginning again. If you enjoyed drifting through this piece of the past, maybe leave a like, or just let the story carry you to sleep. If you'd like more quiet journeys like this one, you can subscribe, but only if it feels right. The world remembers you.